Hello, fictional. Welcome to the Fiction Series X. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei become a apocalypse dragon? Part 1. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Demons, or demons. For every human emotion, there comes the negatives and the positive energies they give off with whatever concept it's associated with. These energies form together within the inky realm of chaos known as the abyss, and spring forth a demon. Demons can be whatever concept can be reacted to by humans. They also harness this power chow's magic to create phenomena and magic that the human mind would struggle to comprehend. An example, a demon of grilling could generate smoke or hot charcoal to burn their enemies. A demon of reefs could protect themselves in core-like body armor, one of a feet could make a laser beam so finely tuned it doesn't even hurt anyone anymore. With their newfound existence, demons go on to do whatever their instincts tell them to do, which is usually to cause havoc. There are cases where a demon's instinct isn't to hurt or harm. Not at all. Sometimes, it's to protect and help. Even when tied to the most unlikely of concepts. In the past. Devil and demon clash in the air. The impact from their magics colliding sends a ripple of thunder throughout the forest. The pale one swings her scythe, but her slash misses the devil, who twists away from her opponent as she descends down onto the forest ground. Riaz dives down, closer to the treetops than she would prefer, surveying for her opponent. It takes but a moment to notice the shimmer, then the flash of the sharpened end of a bone soaring right at her. There is barely enough time to maneuver out of the path of the weapon, and now even less so to notice the oncoming barrage of more and more bones. She flies through the flurry of bones, destroying several with a blast of crimson-black magic. In a brief couple of seconds for respite, Riaz glances down and takes notice at the ground. She veers down into the forest clearing, dodging past trees and branches to catch the perpetrator. The wild energy indicative of the power of destruction tunneled through any tree and towards Moors. Right before impact, the demon creates several pieces of skeletal armor coated her chest and arms. The wave of energy wraps around her in an instant before detonating like a bomb. The armor had done its job very well, all but not in protecting her eyes, however. She's blinded. While she could afford a lost limb, these organs weren't something she could afford to lose. Clutching her scythe in one hand, a sword of bone forms into her hand as she swings wildly around the forest. In the meanwhile, she had directed all of her energy into healing her eyes, but in this frenzied state, the flow was not consistent and it was taking longer than what should be expected. Moments pass and vision returns to her again. It's hazy and dull, not helped by how much energy she had now spent. Blinking a few more times, clarity is all there is as she leaps onto the top of a tree within a single bound. That's when she glances overhead and gets a look at the quickly ascending devil, back facing her. Like a rocket, the pale one races through the sky, propelled off a now shattered tree. She tears the crimson princess out of the sky, held by a massive skeleton hand as they tumble closer and closer to the ground. Riaz charges up another blast, releasing a shockwave that sends both in the opposite directions. The crimson princess breaks her fall with another blast of destruction, softening the ground enough so that the impact would be all but a minor of inconveniences. Moors, on the other hand, simply coated herself completely in armor as she slammed straight down onto the ground. The kick of dust was so immense as flew over the treetops. Not even after the dust settles, another wave of destructive energy slams into her. An explosion sets off in the forest, clouding a small chunk of the area in dust. Riaz looks through the dusty visage, trying to locate her opponent. The blast wasn't enough to full-on kill, not at least with the amount she's taken. But if her timing was right, she should have been hit right as her armor faded away. At the least, she'd be much weaker and unable to keep fighting, at best, being knocked out with a blown-off limb. She waited and waited only to be met with a punch to her side. Her figure curves into the punch, being sent a fair distance away, bouncing off of a rock. While that goes on, Moors leaps into the air and comes right down, summoning a giant skeleton arm to punch her down. She falls right after the descending devil, striking again at the moment of impact, ricocheting her right into the air. Feet touch ground and Moors extends the skeletal limb to slam wrap around her leg and toss her into a tree, just to be countered as Riaz blasts the limb into pieces. She goes flying past some trees for a bit before catching herself mid-air. Descending back down into the soothing feeling a stream she'd fell into, clearly exhausted from the fight. A crash soon follows as the demon cuts through the sum to confront her. Or at least what was left of it. While it shared in Riaz's injuries, bruises and cuts all over, the pale one carried not only a limp from her weakening of her bones, but her arm was also shredded and shriveled, missing the sword she had created. Riaz wiped whatever grime was on her face, wading through the cold water. Moors limps through the gravel, facing off on the other side. "You're looking banged up," she taunted. "Last chance. Turn back now and let us do our duty." Riaz wasn't joking around anymore. Her tone is stern and violent, clearly not willing to budge on any compromise short of Moore's leaving with her life. Sorry, but I took the job already and I have yet to score my payday. And not like the job market is open right now. Smugly, Moores cracks her neck and beats on her leg to get it back in working order. Rhea sighs, before powering up with her raw intensity moving the water beneath her. Whatever leftover power she'd has would be used in the final round. All to determine what was superior. Death. Or destruction. As the words "wake up, Morty" echoed in her ears, Moores slowly emerged from the depths of sleep, her senses jolted by the almost aggressive insistence in her younger brother's voice. Blinking the sleep from her eyes, she turned her gaze towards the source of the disturbance, her red-haired brother, Bell, perched on the edge of her bed with his legs crossed. "Bell, que chingados," she muttered groggily, her voice thick with exhaustion and a touch of annoyance. It was her default response, a reflexive habit picked up from her years of conversing in Spanish. However, her surprise was palpable as Bell, a few years her junior, scolded her with a wagging finger. "Hey. No swearing," he admonished, his expression a mix of disappointment and playful reproach. In that moment, Moores realized that Belle understood her words, comprehending the Spanish language that she often used to vent her frustrations. A brief flash of embarrassment crossed her face, recognizing the frequency with which she must have unleashed a string of profanities in his presence. Resigned to the fact that her brother wouldn't budge until she rose from her slumber, Moores summoned her remaining energy and pushed herself up from the comfort of her bed. Stretching her limbs and shaking off the remnants of sleep, she cast a weary gaze at Belle, his mischievous smile hinting at the adventure he had in mind for the day. After stumbling her way to the bathroom and groggily brushing her teeth, Moores hastily descended the stairs to join her father for breakfast. As she reached the bottom, she was taken aback to find Azrael, the angel of death and carrier of God, donning a pink apron. The sight was an amusing contrast to his overall appearance, pale-skinned, with dark, short hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He possessed a tall yet slender frame, his eyes so dark that their depth swallowed any trace of his pupils. "Mornin', Papa," Moores mumbled, still fighting off the remnants of sleep. On the other hand, Belle gracefully slid down the stairs with a practiced ease, finishing the descent with a not-so-graceful roll, before offering their own greeting to their father. Azrael's voice resonated through the room, a perfect embodiment of someone you'd expect to be the angel of deep, cold, yet strangely soothing. It commanded attention without being forceful. "Hey, guys. Nice to see you up to witness the sunrise. How was your sleep?" Azrael's question elicited a peculiar look from Moores, as if she found it amusing. She couldn't resist replying with a touch of sarcasm, "Oh, just perfect, flawless sleep." The response earned her a bemused expression from Azrael, while Belle couldn't help but feel slightly perplexed by Moore's exaggerated answer. "Moores," Azrael chuckled, "if you had a bad night's sleep, just say so. No need to try and imitate Belle, alright? We already have one of him, and that's plenty." His words prompted Moores to let out a resigned sigh, realizing her attempt at humor hadn't quite landed. She quickly inquired about breakfast. Azrael passes the eldest sibling, Moores, a steaming cup of coffee, the aroma wafting up into her nostrils. She eagerly grasps the cup, feeling the warmth radiate through her hands, and takes a deep sip as if it were the elixir of life itself. Her eyes sparkle with a mixture of delight and caffeine-induced anticipation. Amused by Moore's enthusiasm, Azrael chuckles, a deep rumble emanating from his chest. "Yeah, you're welcome," he says, his voice filled with paternal affection and a touch of amusement. He watches as Moores continues to savor the dark liquid, clearly relishing the revitalizing effect it has on her. Moores briefly breaks her intense gaze on the cup to exchange a glance with her father, a silent moment of connection that speaks volumes. There is an unspoken understanding between them, a bond forged by shared experiences and the love of a parent and child. Returning her attention to the coffee, Moores savors the last few sips before finally emptying the cup, her thirst quenched for the time being. She sets the now empty vessel aside with a satisfied sigh, feeling the caffeine course through her veins, energizing her for the day ahead. Meanwhile, Azrael turns his attention to Belle, the younger sibling. With a warm smile, he places a plate filled with toast, eggs, and crispy bacon in front of him. It's a typical breakfast, the kind that brings comfort and familiarity to the start of the day. Belle's eyes light up with hunger as he gazes at the delicious bread before him. He murmurs appreciatively, his stomach rumbling in response. "Thanks, Dad," he exclaims, his gratitude evident in his voice as he eagerly picks up his utensils and dives into the meal, savoring each mouthful. As his children enjoy their breakfast, Azrael moves back to the stove, his actions a testament to his love and care for his family. The sizzle of the cooking food fills the kitchen, a symphony of flavors and aromas that create a warm and inviting atmosphere. "Now, kids. I needed to tell you something." Moores leaned in closely, while Belle continued chomping away at his meal, seemingly unfazed by the impending news. Azrael ignored Belle's eating habits and proceeded to explain. Leaning in, Moores followed closely, as did the black-haired angel. "Our benefactor called me earlier this morning. He's off to Tokyo for a business trip and he wanted you two to join him." Moores couldn't believe what she was hearing, and Bell stopped devouring his breakfast upon hearing the name. "Mr. W called. How's he doing?" Bell exclaimed with excitement, using a nickname that Moores found far from clever, but she couldn't help but chuckle at his enthusiasm. Azrael confirmed that Wyatt wanted them to accompany him to a business expo in Tokyo. "So, we're going on a road trip." Bell jumped up in the air, but Moores quickly restrained him with a large skeletal arm. "Calm down, bro," Moores said, releasing her hold on Bell and bringing him back to the ground. Azrael clarified that they would indeed be going to Tokyo, but it would be 3 days from that moment. In the meantime, Moores needed to inform Bell's teachers about his upcoming absence, and they both had to finish any pending work in Kuo. Bell and Moores were excited about the prospect of the trip, but Bell couldn't help but wonder if Azrael would join them. Azrael shook his head, explaining that the journey was for the 3 of them and he had other responsibilities to attend to. He realized he was running late and advised them to start getting ready. Moores grabbed her car keys and Bell, while still dragging his breakfast, followed her out. As Azrael stood there alone, a mysterious presence seemed to loom over his mind. It questioned his decision to send the 2 young ones on this journey. "Are you truly sure they are ready for this?" the voice asked. Azrael looked down, contemplating the question. "Moores is, but Bell." The voice suggested letting others handle the situation, but Azrael's resolve was strong. "No. Those 2 are the joys of my life and I've raised them for days like this. As a father, it's my duty to watch the fruits of my labor grow." The enigmatic presence warned that time would tell, and Azrael responded, "Yes, unfortunately, it will. But faith carries the responsibility I have given them." Moore's eyes groggily stutter open as she rises from the ground, feeling the rough touch of grass beneath her fingers. Surrounding her is a lush environment, bursting with blades of grass and newly blossoming plants with hues she's never seen before. This place is unlike any field she's seen in Japan, Mexico, or even on the internet. Like they were from a different planet. Unruffling her hair and brushing off dirt from her clothes, she stumbles through the clearing. This world looked so dreary. The mainly cloudy sky was blue but drained of any brightness. Every blade of grass was dry as each step sounded off with a crunch. Her breaths condensed into white clouds. It was cold, so cold that frostbite would take her very soon. But bizarrely, there wasn't even a hint of snowflake or ice layering the ground. She reaches over the hill, looking down at a rippling pond. With a misplaced step, she tumbles down the hill. Her face gazes up at the sky, no longer adorned with its crown jewel. Despite the sunless day, she could still feel a warm shimmer radiating onto her body. Each of her paced breaths sent out a cooled fog. Her eyes start to twitch in annoyance from the phantom heat, finally getting her to stand on her feet. Oncoming exhaustion racked her limbs with a pain she hadn't felt in a long time. Skin starts to become colder and colder with a gruesome blue hue. The pain grew inside her, beating against her body like it was trying to tell her to give up and lay down on the ground. And finally, she gave in, embracing the pound with a wet splash as her body gave way to gravity. Her nearly lifeless body rested in the water for a while, to some, what seemed like hours, and to other, a moment. When the time had come, a strange force started to carry Moore's body towards the center of the pound. As it nears it, a shimmering door forms, which opens up and sends out a powerful gust of wind, disturbing the water into a furious splash, but leaving the body undisturbed. The skeletal hand extends forward from the gleaming door, steadily moving across the water. Just it passing by halted all life around it, forming floating icicles in the air, freezing the pound, rending the grass apart with each tremble of its rackety bones, and the clouds in the sky dissipated into nothing more than vapor, then smoke. "Weak. You weren't capable of crossing the field, not when you're like this." Bony fingers wrap around the soaked corpse. Her body started to ashen, cracks forming on her skin, teeth withering and rattling, and her eyes fading out of her sockets, leaving only a void. Coming here, willingly or not, was a poor decision. I find your current will lackluster, in combination with your pitiable vision. You shall return when your soul is ready and not any time sooner. The arm pulls Moore's body back into the blackened nothingness. The shimmering door cracks into pieces, slipping back into the water. And within moments, everything returns to the way it was. It would remain so until she returned. Regardless, Moore starts to regain consciousness, her appearance returning back to its healthy glow. There was a sudden shift enveloping her senses. The lush garden, the empty world, and the voice that lingered in her dead mind started to fade away. In the blink of an eye, Moore finds herself standing on a familiar sidewalk right in front of Kuo Academy. And in more shock, he awakened in a position as if she had just fallen asleep. As Moore returns her focus to the present, she finds her younger brother, Bell, standing beside her. His familiar voice draws her attention, and she looks down to meet his gaze. Belle seemed slightly concerned, wondering why Moores had remained silent for a few seconds longer than usual. "Hey sis. Are you still there?" Belle asks with genuine care. "You weren't talking for like 5 seconds, and your eyes were closed, is something wrong?" Moore's mind briefly drifts back to what might as well have been her death. It had felt like much more than just 5 seconds in that mysterious realm. Her confusion lingers, but she quickly pushes it aside, not wanting to worry her younger sibling. And in hindsight, she hadn't gotten much sleep in a long while. That can't be good for the human demonic brain. All kinds of illusions and stuff are prevalent without proper care in a regular human, so her being a particular case, things can be much more vivid. She thinks. "Shoot, my bad dude," Moores replies, managing to keep her composure. "I guess I spaced out for a moment. These gears are still grinding, you know. It's just that I saw a squirrel and I guess I got xerophobia." She gives Belle a reassuring smile, hoping he won't notice the lingering traces of bewilderment in her expression. To put his mind at ease, she affectionately kisses his forehead, a gesture that never fails to make him blush. As Belle marches off to the front of the school, Moores watches him for a moment, grateful for his presence and the anchor he provides in her life. Despite the strange experience she just had, the love and responsibility she feels as an older sister remain constant in her world. Each step was starting to get more painful, Moores beginning to remember the voice in her vision. How demeaning it was to her lifeless body, like she was speaking to something with no soul. Something that didn't see her as a person, or even as a demon. She should be pushing this in the back of her mind, but every time she tried to forget, it would ram itself back into prominence. Banging her hand against her noggin was the only thing that seemed to soothe the intrusive thoughts. Finally at peace for the briefest moment, all that came to mind was, "Shit, I've got chores to do." At Kuo Academy. Belle sat on top of a table in the bustling school cafeteria, his bag open beside him as he rummaged through it, searching for a small snack to quell the growing hunger before the morning classes began. His hazel eyes glanced over his shoulder, and a mischievous grin spread across his face as he spotted a familiar figure with a goofy hairstyle approaching. The boy wearing glasses, Motohama, positioned himself on another nearby table, facing a brown-haired boy whom Belle knew as Issei. Motohama's tone carried a hint of perverseness as he leaned in to probe Issei about a certain someone. "So, any dirt between you and Goldilocks?" he asked with a knowing smirk. Issei chuckled lightly, shaking his head as he considered his response. "Oh, Asia. Well, she's cute and nice, plus she's got nice, you know," he gestured with a hand, blushing slightly. Motohama interrupted with an excited gleam in his eyes, "But come on, dude. You can't just skip out on the opportunity of a lifetime. I've heard church girls are into some pretty kinky shit." Issei raised an eyebrow, trying to suppress a laugh. "Hey, I mean, Asia isn't like that. She's a lot more wholesome than your typical nun," he replied, defending Asia's honor. Before the conversation could delve further into the realms of gossip, a familiar streak of vibrant red hair appeared behind the two boys, engrossed in their discussion. Riaz, with her confident and alluring presence, made her entrance. "Hello, Issei and Motohama." She greeted them cheerfully, causing both boys to jump in surprise. Motohama even lost his balance and fell off his chair, creating a small commotion. Issei, although caught off guard, quickly composed himself, taking a step back with an involuntary exclamation of "fuck." That was more of a surprised reflex than any actual expletive. Elle couldn't help but chuckle at Issei's reaction, knowing he had unintentionally caught him off guard. As Issei slightly scolded him with a stern glance, Belle's laughter subsided into a friendly smile. Issei soon wrapped his arm around Belle's neck, signaling the end of the brief comedic moment and the beginning of a casual conversation between friends. The camaraderie between the two was evident as they engaged in light-hearted banter. Before long, Motohama slid into the conversation, holding up a book for both of them to see. His devious grin and a mischievous glint in his eyes made it clear that he was up to something. Belle recognized Motohama's antics and braced himself for what was to come. "Hey there, Belle-kun," Motohama exclaimed, his tone dripping with playfulness. He raised the 18 book with scantily dressed women on the front page, resembling a swimsuit catalog. "Mitsuda wanted me to give this to you. You know, just as a little gift." Belle noticed Mitsuda's absence from school that day, but was unsure why his friend had sent him such a gift. His mind raced, trying to come up with a suitable response that wouldn't offend anyone. "No thanks. Girls don't interest me," Belle replied, hoping to handle the situation diplomatically. However, Motohama and Issei exchanged surprised glances, clearly not expecting this response from their friend. Belle quickly tried to clarify, his face turning slightly flustered. "Wait. Not like that. I mean I like girls," he stammered, hoping to rectify the situation. Motohama couldn't help but doubt Belle's explanation, chuckling at the moment's awkwardness, much to Belle's embarrassment. Feeling the need to lift his friend's spirits, Issei walked over to Belle, offering a supportive comment. "Hey, I mean if you're into that I'm not gonna judge." Bell turned to Issei, his expression showing both surprise and gratitude for his understanding. "Oh, so you aren't." Issei's words finally registered and Bell realized that he had accidentally created a misunderstanding. He didn't mean to imply that he wasn't interested in girls, he didn't want the 18 book. Sensing Bell's sincerity, Issei assured him, "No worries, man. I know you didn't mean it like that. It's all good." Bell took a deep breath, recompassing himself after the awkward moment. Deciding it was best to put the situation behind him, he settled into his chair, planning to move on from the unusual gift exchange. Before doing so, he handed the book back to Motohama, offering it to him. "Take this, please," Bell requested, not wanting to keep the book he had no interest in. Issei peered at the book, reading the title Guys and Gals Swimsuit Catalog. A realization dawned on him as he looked back at Motohama, who was still grinning mischievously. This whole situation may have been an elaborate prank orchestrated by Mitsuda and Motohama from the start. Issei couldn't help but wonder if they had been planning this humorous twist all along, making Bell's accidental revelation even more amusing in hindsight. Later. After the school day had concluded, Bell and Issei stayed behind to tackle the unenviable task of cleaning up a room left in disarray by one of the clubs. Bell mused that it didn't quite make sense to have unrelated students cleaning up someone else's mess, but he shrugged it off, thinking, it is what it is. On the other hand, Issei was audibly expressing his displeasure with the situation. He grumbled about the sheer monotony of the work, his lack of familiarity with physical labor, and the repetitive nature of the task. Box after box, he picked them up and moved them around, driving him to the point of frustration. "This is so boring," Issei complained, dropping a box unceremoniously. Meanwhile, Bell sat on a table nearby, engrossed in the attempt to fix a lamp. Issei looked at him incredulously. "What are you even doing with that thing?" Bell's eyes lit up with his characteristic optimism. "Trying to fix this lamp." One of the club leaders asked for this. Issei couldn't help but be amused and exasperated by Bell's attitude. "You know how to work that ridiculous thing." With a grin, Bell responded, "Nope, but now's a good enough time, if ever, to figure out how." Issei sighed, shaking his head at his friend's unwavering enthusiasm. "Ah. I think I got it." Bell suddenly exclaimed, successfully turning on the lamp. However, his success came at a price, as an overwhelming amount of light flooded the room. Issei winced and shielded his eyes in discomfort, feeling the intensity of the morning. Bell quickly switched the lamp off, a sheepish expression on his face. "Well, if it's ever too dark outside, it might be useful," he quipped, trying to make light of the situation. Before they could dwell on the lamp mishap, the door to the room slid open, revealing Yudo Kiba, known by some as Mr. Pretty Boy and by others as the Prince. The blonde student regarded the two friends with a curious look. "There you two are. The president needs you two in the club room right now. What are you doing?" Kiba asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and concern, as Issei dropped the final box with a thud. Issei sighed, explaining the situation. "Some of the other clubs had us do their dirty work. And someone else didn't just let us take a hike." Despite facing away from the duo due to the lingering light-induced discomfort, Bell said, "Hey, it was a good thing to do." Kiba observed Bell for a moment before turning his attention back to Issei. "Best get a move on, don't want to upset her now, do ya?" Kiba's words carried a hint of knowing amusement. "Alright, let's go." Issei declared with renewed energy, and Bell, still recovering from the blinding light, promptly followed, albeit with a slight misstep that led him straight into a wall. Issei rushed to help his friend lying flat on his back. "We need to give your eye some time to heal," Issei commented dryly. With Bell somewhat disoriented, Issei supported him, and together, they trailed behind Kiba as they headed toward the club room, ready to face whatever task awaited them there. Meanwhile, Moores bid the employees farewell with a casual nod, a smile flickering briefly across her lips before she donned her coat and exited the diner through the back door. The dim glow of the streetlight stretched her shadow along the deserted sidewalk, playing a silent game of hide and seek with the darkness. Her dinner was done, and now, her focus shifted to the path ahead. The night embraced her with a cool, crisp air that hinted at the possibility of rain. The aroma of distant petrichor mingled with the urban scents, creating a unique fragrance that only the night could offer. As she walked, her steps were measured and silent, the movements deliberate and calculated. The subtle shift in the shadows caught her attention, but her expression remained impassive, betraying nothing. She was not alone. Demons from the otherworldly realm lurked, their presence unmistakable to her experienced senses. They thought themselves clever, stalking their prey under the guise of the night's veiling darkness. Moore's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. She had been dealing with creatures like these long enough to read their tactics as quickly as the words in a book. The demons linked closer, their movements cautious but not cautious enough. They were predators, drawn to the aura surrounding her, yet unaware of the predator they were dealing with. Moores quickened her pace, her footsteps echoing softly in the empty street. The tension was palpable, a tangible thread connecting her to the lurking shadows. "Nice night for a stroll," a voice purred from the obscurity, an attempt at nonchalance that fell flat against her practiced ears. Moores glanced to her left, where a shadow seemed to detach itself from the darkness, merging into a form that could almost pass for humans. The shadow demon materializing from the darkness was an eerie blend of twisted forms and ethereal presence. It existed in a realm between the corporeal and the intangible, their appearances shifting and morphing like the flickering flames of a dying fire. Its body was haphazard assemblages of darkness, inky tendrils coalescing into a semblance of humanoid shape. Jagged spikes protruded from its backs, resembling the distorted silhouette of wings. Limbs were elongated and sinuous, terminating in clawed fingers that seemed to merge seamlessly with the shadows they emerged from. The demon's eyes were the most disconcerting feature. Orbs of ghostly light glowed with an otherworldly intensity. The colors within those eyes shifted, swirling like a turbulent storm, revealing glimpses of emotions far removed from the human experience. They radiated hunger and malice, a sinister awareness of the world around them. When it moved, it was with a fluidity that defied the constraints of the physical realm. Its forms rippled and distorted, allowing them to dart through the shadows and weave around obstacles in an unsettling dance. As they approached, a frigid chill permeated the air, causing a shiver to run down the spine of anyone unfortunate enough to be in their presence. These shadow demons were creatures of chaos, born from the obscurity between dimensions. They were predators of the night, drawn to the energy and aura of unsuspecting beings like moths to a flame. She regarded the demon with an arched eyebrow, her expression a perfect blend of casual indifference. "Strolling's overrated," she replied, her voice carrying the same detachment as her expression. She continued walking, her gaze forward. Another figure materialized from the shadows, this one to her right. "You've got something we want," it hissed, its voice a sibilant whisper that sent a chill down her spine if she were the type to be affected by such things. Moores finally allowed a hint of genuine amusement to touch her lips. "You always think you can just take what you want, right?" Her tone was dry, as though she was conversing about the weather. The demons, their patience waning, closed in, surrounding her. Their eyes gleamed with predatory hunger, unaware they were the prey in this encounter. Moore stopped, her posture relaxed but ready, her nonchalant demeanor a thin veil over the storm beneath. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," she mused aloud, her words carrying a weight that seemed to echo in the tranquil night. "I'm not some unsuspecting human you can intimidate. And you certainly aren't the first to come after me." In the midst of the shadowy confrontation, Moores acted with a calculated swiftness that bespoke her experience in dealing with such entities. Her caramel-toned hand extended outward, a seemingly ordinary movement that belied the supernatural transformation beneath her skin. The bone abruptly jutted forth from her forearm, an eerie occurrence that would have been disconcerting to witness. But Moores remained resolute, her focus unwavering. In a display of unearthly control, the bone continued to elongate, defying the limits of anatomy until it surpassed her own height. With a fluid motion, she snapped it free, her grip firm and assured. What was once a bone now possessed a macabre allure, a scythe formed from an amalgamation of various bone types, each piece melded seamlessly into a weapon of deadly elegance. To the shadow demons, this transformation occurred in the blink of an eye, their perception of time distorted by their ethereal nature. As they lunged, confident in their malevolent power, they were met with a sight that sent an involuntary shudder through their dark forms. Moores stood ready, armed, and dangerous. Her expression, cool and detached, betrayed not an ounce of apprehension. In her grasp, the bone scythe gleamed with an ominous light, its wicked curvature promising only doom to those who dared approach. The weapon seemed like an extension of herself, a manifestation of the strength that lay within her. The first shadow demon lunged at her with a guttural snarl, its contorted form propelled by unnatural speed. Moores, however, anticipated its attack with an almost serene composure. Moore's internal monologue remained steady, her thoughts detached even in the heat of battle. These creatures, she mused, may seem intimidating, but they're fundamentally weak. Their existence is based on exploiting fear and vulnerability. As the creature closed in, she shifted her weight effortlessly, a dancer's twirl that seamlessly merged with the deadly arc of her bone scythe. The blade sliced through the darkness, meeting the demon's ethereal form with a resounding clash. The sound was otherworldly, a mingling of steel and shadows, as the scythe's malevolent energy countered the creature's malefic essence. The demon let out a harrowing cry, its form flickering as though struggling to maintain coherence. Its twisted features contorted in agony, a grim reminder that these creatures were mere aberrations held together by the threads of their own malignancy. With a final splintering, the demon dissolved into fragments of shadow, vanishing like mist before the morning sun. Moore's gaze never wavered, her eyes sharp as she surveyed the battlefield. Her internal monologue remained steadfast, her thoughts echoing with a detached beepsis. They hunt the vulnerable, exploiting their fears. But in the face of defiance, they falter. Her focus shifted, pinpointing the next shadow demon that lunged from the darkness. This one was more cautious, its approach deliberate as it tested her defenses. It feigned left, then lunged right, aiming to catch her off guard. But Moore's was already in motion, her footwork a reflection of her uncanny awareness. With an almost dance-like sidestep, she avoided the attack's trajectory, her scythe moving in tandem with her body. Her counter-attack was a fluid extension of her evasion. The bone scythe swept low, carving a lethal arc that sliced through the demon's form. It let out a piercing wail, its tortured scream mingling with the echoes of its dissolution. The shadows seemed to recoil from her as if repelled by the sheer force of her presence. Moore's movements were economical, each motion purposeful and efficient. She navigated the battle with a familiarity born of countless encounters. They try to cloud the mind. But strength lies in clarity, in harnessing the power that stems from within. The third demon, its form larger and more grotesque, surged forward with furious energy. Its shape shifted erratically, like a mirage distorted by heat. It was a formidable opponent, its unpredictability a testament to its embodied chaos. Moore's met its charge head-on, her grip on the bone scythe unyielding. As the last of the demons charged, its form shifting and contorting in a desperate attempt to overwhelm her, Moore's lips quirked with a touch of disdain. They're mere echoes of genuine malice, she thought, her grip on the bone scythe unwavering. They rely on surprise and intimidation. But I've dealt with far worse. Their clash was a clash of wills, of opposing forces vying for dominance. The demon's claws raked through the air, trailing tendrils of shadow that seemed to drip like liquid darkness. Moore's parried each strike with fluid precision, her scythe a barrier that deflected the malevolent energy that radiated from the creature. In the midst of her battle with the third shadow demon, a flicker of unease passed through Moore's thoughts like a distant storm cloud. Amidst a dance of blades and the clash of energies, a thought entered Bell. The name resonated within her consciousness, a reminder of the one she cared for beyond the realms she traversed. Is he safe? The question echoed like a resounding gong in her mind, a note of concern that she couldn't ignore. As the battle raged on, her focus momentarily wavered, a fraction of a second where her thoughts veered from the immediate threat to the one she considered a friend. The shadow demon seized the opportunity, its malevolent form surging forward with renewed aggression. Its clawed fingers tore through the air, aiming for her throat. Instinct kicked in, pulling her back to the present. Moore shifted her stance with almost preternatural speed, narrowly evading the attack. Her scythe met the demon's form with a retaliatory strike, forcing it back into the shadows. Focus, she chided herself inwardly, the concern for Bell not diminishing, but instead serving as a catalyst for her determination. He's strong. He can handle himself. With renewed resolve, Moore's pressed forward, her movements fluid and precise. The shadow demon's resistance was fierce, its attacks more desperate as it recognized her unwavering determination. But with each clash, each strike that she parried and countered, Moore's confidence grew, her internal monologue shifting from concern to quiet reassurance. As the battle reached its climax, with the third shadow demon's malevolent energy wavering beneath the onslaught of her strength, Moore's felt a pull, a connection that transcended the battle at hand. It was as if an invisible thread connected her to Bell, a tether that conveyed a sense of urgency. Bell, she thought, the name a silent prayer as she struck the final blow that shattered the demon's form. As the shadows dissipated, she wasted no time, her decision clear. Without hesitation, she turned away from the dissipating darkness, her gaze directed not toward the battlefield she had just triumphed over, but toward the path that led elsewhere. Bell's safety had become her priority, the concern now a driving force. The streets blurred past her as she moved with a newfound urgency, her steps swift and determined. Hold on, Bell, her thoughts echoed like a whispered plea. In her heart, she believed he was capable. Still, she couldn't ignore the instinct that urged her onward, that propelled her toward whatever awaited. The echoes of the battle faded behind her as she vanished into the night. The internal monologue that had guided her struggle transformed into a whispered mantra that spoke not of strength but of purpose to protect. Meanwhile, 5 minutes ago. Thibault walks out to the school courtyard, accompanied by Bell and Issei. He quickly spins around, looking to the both of them. The president said she would be here. He wonders out loud. Issei is similarly perplexed, as Riaz isn't one to just not show up when she calls on people. Bell, meanwhile, is looking up into the sky as he waits for anyone to say anything remotely important. He's tapping his cheeks, mumbling some random noises. Whatever can just pass the time faster. Moments fly by, and before they know it, nothing happens. Where is she? The swordsman paced back and forth, clearly concerned. His two allies are similarly stressed, more so for Kiba. You think something happened? Bella asks. Like, were they attacked by someone? Issei shakes his head at this. No. Why would someone go after her when there are so many weaker devils in the vicinity? Kiba, finally tired of waiting, walks off in the direction of the orc schoolhouse. You two, come on. Someone's gotta be there, and we'll get some answers. Treading along, they reach the disheveled schoolhouse, and the door creaks open as the three boys enter. Hello. Issei calls out. President. Akeno. Anyone? No response. They slide on through and start looking around. Kiba looks up at the upper 2 floors while Belle and Issei look on the ground. Wow, this place feels a lot worse than I remember it being, the redhead commented. Issei can't help but chuckle at this. Yeah, it's called Victorian style. Personally, not a fan but. No, not like that, Belle interrupts, like, the rooms look way older and there's a huge buildup on dust on everything. Pausing for a moment, Issei then takes a closer look. Huge helpings of dust and grime had built up on the furniture. Much more than the normal for the schoolhouse's interior. That is bizarre. There's a collection of footsteps and the 2 glance back. Issei runs past any chairs in the way while Belle unnecessarily hops over furniture. When they came by the stairwell, Kiba stood there. He had a sword in one hand and a look of concern on his face. President's magic circle, it's gone. These words sent panic through Issei, and Belle, while a little more confused, could tell this was serious. What do you mean it's gone? The brown-haired student perplexed. Kiba hops down onto the ground, rushing by the door. Something erased President's magic circle. Someone's on school's ground and they aren't friendly. We need to get out of here. He claps her hand on the doorknob and he opens it. However, there's a shine coming from the doorframe, causing Kiba to cover his eyes and the 2 other boys to immediately rush over to see what happened. However, when they arrive, their eyes are held wide up in shock. The door led back into the school. But this wasn't the normal Kuo Academy. Instead, the room they walked into was dilapidated. Mold was growing from cracks and crevices, and weird greenish-black fluid seeped from the ceiling. Roots were embedded into the walls, but no plants could be seen linked to them. There was no light fixtures, and the light coming from the windows was low and unnatural, pure white like a sheet of paper. It looked like the room could come down upon them any second from now. Taking a moment to collect their bearings, the boys walked into the room. Something or someone was messing with something. Whether it be reality or their minds was up for debate. But they couldn't just stay in the old schoolhouse forever. Whatever effects were out and about in the school were slowly making its way into the schoolhouse. At this point, they had to bet that the thing that made this was deep within. Kiba told the 2 to get ready. Issei called out to his boosted gear while Belle grabbed a nearby pipe. Not as impressive as the other 2 boys by a margin. Kiba walked out first, followed by Belle and then Issei. Stay close. And be on your guard. They creeped through the lit room, each panel of the floors feeling wet and soft, as if water damage had been done here. As they got closer to the opposite end of the room, a foul stench emerged and grew stronger and stronger. Ugh. It's awful in here. The boosted gear user nearly retches as he picks up on the smell. Similarly, Belle was struggling to even keep his eyes open or even walk without a wobble. Kiba didn't seem to pick up on this or just had enough fortitude to ignore the smell. They finally reached the end of the room. Before them was door with wood rotted to the pointed where it was melting into the frame of the door. Kiba reached out for a handle before stopping himself. Figuring that it probably wasn't a good idea to touch this possibly toxic door, he took a swing of his blade and sliced into it. It split apart like it was a solid in spite of its slimy texture. The next room was as big as a gymnasium. An otherworldly swamp had taken root, defying the laws of nature as humans know them. The air was thick with humidity, carrying the unmistakable scent of damp earth and rotting vegetation. Dim, flickering bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting an eerie, greenish glow that illuminated the bizarre scene. Demonic flies, their wings buzzing with a malevolent energy, swarmed in dense, chaotic clusters. Their compound eyes gleamed with crimson light as they darted through the air. There were small creatures with leather wings that couldn't. Their wings were folded above them, giving them a tear shape as they stood on 2 chicken-like legs. They had a large mouth filled with fangs and a long tongue. At the center of this nightmarish swamp, shrouded in an ethereal mist, a colossal stone stood in the muck. Covered in moss that glowed a faint ghostly green, the stone seemed ancient. Its surface was etched with cryptic runes, faintly luminescent and pulsating in eerie synch with the rest of this unholy place. The stone exuded an aura of dread and arcane power that blasted the boys in it as they bore witness to it. Both Kiba and Issei stood confidently through the blast of power, the former slightly struggling to stand. Belle, on the other hand, was brought to his knees as the entire dark force of the stone was upon him. His body ached, but not out of pain, and not even fear. This was a new feeling, something completely foreign to the boy. Moments pass, and the stone calms down, aura no longer pouring out and causing everyone lets out heavy gasps. Issei looks to his red-haired friend, who was still on one knee. Belle. He cried out, "Are you okay?" He picks up the boy by the shoulder and brings him up to his feet. He had recovered quickly from the blast of aura, much to Issei's relief. "Here, lem help you out." Issei reaches out his cladded arm, and a green glow radiates from the gem. Immediately, an aura envelops the red-haired boy and Belle feels his body strengthen and recover. Soon enough, he's back in action and standing on his legs. Oh, thanks Issei. I could just about hug you. He reaches out his arms, but before that can continue, a loud booming voice rumbles throughout the gym. You have entered my domain. You are fools for doing so. The large mass falls down from the ceiling and onto the stone, but it didn't crush it, only managing to shake it slightly. Its bulging, warty skin glistened with a sickly green hue, as though it had been soaked in the sludge of a hellish swamp. Upon its misshapen head, two twisted jagged horns jutted upward. The horns seemed to have been carved from the darkest obsidian, sharp enough to pierce the heart of any unfortunate soul that dared to approach. Each horn bore grotesque carvings, symbols etched into the very bone. The creature's limbs were grotesquely muscular, each webbed foot ending in talon-like claws, along with jagged bony spines protruded along its spine. In the presence of this demon frog, the very air grew heavy with malevolence, and the ground seemed to writhe in protest. Two devils and a human. I was expecting less, but you should not be any trouble. Oh yeah? Issei retorts. What's a bug-eating monster like you got that makes you so impressive? The demon lets out a tumultuous laugh. The gym begins to shake and all the creatures form up around the stone. The three boys all get into a stance to ready for battle. The barbed tongue swipes at the three, each evading in different directions. Issei had landed knee-deep in the swamp water. It was disgusting to the touch and he was struggling to stomach the sensation. Trying to hold on, he raises the boosted gear up, charging a red energy. However, he's swarmed by demonic flies, scratching and biting at his skin. He tried to swat them away, but for everyone he managed to kill, it seemed like many more would pop up in place. Bell stumbled onto a rock, dazed. He tried to get up, but a sharp sensation stung into his side. He screamed in frustration as this demonic chicken started to chew into his body. The boy grabbed the small monster and chucked it into a nearby wall. However, another one dashed by and bore its teeth into his knees. Bell tried to strike it but missed, the pipe struck the ground and dented. More and more demonic chickens jumped from their perches and started to tear into the boy, Bell trying his best to keep them away. Kiba, meanwhile, dashed at the boss of the labyrinth. He slashed a blade into its skin, only for the edge to get caught on the bilious skin. Weak. The monster proclaims before he swipes at the devil. Kiba quickly pulled the sword out and leaped back, catching himself on from falling face first into the water. He pointed the blade forward as multiple blades jutted out from the ground. The sheer amount could overwhelm the frog's skin as it howled in pain. It retaliated with its blade tongue, but Kiba was too fast for him to land a decent strike. He kept summoning blacksmith's blades to repeatedly pierce the monster's skin, slicing chunks that would dissolve in seconds. The monster was now infuriated and slammed one of its feet down, dispersing the created blades in a cloud of acidic smoke. That wasn't all, as said smoke had sunk deep into the ground and traveled to where the boy was now standing, and within seconds, it exploded forward like a geyser, slightly burning Kiba and sending him up into the air. Before Kiba could react, the signature move of its stretched out tongue slammed into his chest. The sheer weight behind it knocked the air out of him and sent him flying into a wall. The blonde grips at his chest, feeling what might be broken ribs. He glances up to see the frog already launching another attack. This time, it was intercepted by Issei, blocking it with his left arm. There was a faint hiss of toxic material staining the sacred gear, but the boy turned around to check up on Kiba. Are you okay? He asks. Kiba rises to his feet, toughing out the pain. Yeah, where's Bell? Issei looked for his other ally, but seemed to have lost track of him, just remembering what was the sound of yelling, while he was preoccupied with the horde of flies. This thought was interrupted by a torrent of acid, which the two dodged. The frog monster chortled at how easily distracted devils could become and began stomping on top of its stone, causing more and more acidic smog to rupture the ground. The two wasted no time and started to rush towards the monster, with Kiba taking the lead. Rows of blades jut towards the demon, who swipes away at them, but then, Issei appeared from off the side and threw a punch to its cheek. This attack had clearly been boosted with strength as it caused the monster to shake in pain. In its attempt to return the favor with a swipe, Kiba slashed its underbelly. Black liquid spilled forth as the demon heaved to keep its innards from leaking out. In the next moment, a powerful strike reached its back, laying the monster flat on its stomach. It's wide open, Kiba. Issei shouts, and Kiba rises up, bringing his sword up, and prepares to deliver a killing strike to the frog's head. Through a disoriented gaze, the frog looked in horror and, in a panic, whipped his head to the side and sent his tongue out as fast as it could. The vile mass struck the devil's side even harder than before, audible cracks able to be heard before he was struck into the ground. Kiba. Issei yells, and when he prepares to unleash another boosted attack, a crack in the ground forms and a geyser of acidic gas shoots upwards. Issei yelled in pain, flung onto the ground. The wet soil contrasted with his burned skin as he writhed in agony. Is that all? You devils claim to be our superiors, yet you fell to me. How laughable. The demon is chuckling at the boy's pain. All these wounds mean nothing if I still stand. Though, I could use you to recover a bit. As he began to crack open his mouth, a metal pipe was sent flying into its eye. The demon yells and starts searching for the culprit. He found him as next to the injured Issei was Bell, who was missing a hand and had several wounds covering his body, with a blood-stained face. "There you are, monster." Bell dramatically yells out. He moves to the ground and whispers to Issei, "Sorry it took me so long to help." Issei was less worried about that and more worried about Bell's injuries. He was clearly badly injured, but still seemed to keep a cheerful attitude. "Bell, your hand." Dottie croaked out, but the boy simply shushed him. "Here, allow me to take care of this." Bell looks back and starts to walk towards the demon. Your fiendish ways shall end here and now. No longer shall you torment my friends." The demon notices the boy's strange language before laughing at how comical and dramatic he is. "Weak," he exclaimed as he shot out his tongue. Bell evades it, jumping into a sprint as he dashes towards the monster. He chucks the pipe in hand with a spin. The metal bar bounds and impales the frog's eye. The monster roars, and Bell hops up onto the stone and jumps even higher to grab back the pipe. However, part of the metal is rusted and decaying. Bell shakes his head at this before flipping backward and sliding down, slicing into the side of the frog. Bell stumbles onto the ground, looking at the monster, then writhes in pain. Leaping up, he goes in for a final overhead strike before a stinging sensation strikes into his belly and rings throughout his body. There's barely a moment for Bell to process this, agony fading as his body limps. Bell had been pierced by the frog's forked tongue before he chortles. Pathetic. Pointless naivety like this gets fools killed. The monster rears its head back before opening his teeth-filled maw. "At least you'll serve as a nice meal." He brings his tongue closer to his mouth. "Bon appetit." Destroy. A flood of red demonic energy washes over the frog demon. The bileless creature doesn't utter a word or even a sound as every part of its body below its head is instantly erased. At that remains, it's the stone it stood on. The head slams down as Bell falls out of the creature's tongue. Soon after, the gymnasium begins to dissolve, revealing that they weren't even in a gymnasium, they were all outside. The demon's eyes bolted around to see its complete lack of body. It tried to speak, but nothing but groans came out. Standing before the monster, two girls look down at the head of the demon. "Seems like you don't exert enough power to finish it instantly. May I?" "Go ahead." A strike of lightning rains down on the frog demon, quickly frying the monster into a dried husk of dusty bones. It was dead within moments, something unexpected for this kind of monster. Issei looked up as a hand reached down. It was Kaneko, being her same old unemotional self. "Hey. Are you okay? Can you stand?" Issei nods at this comment and Kaneko pulls her hand back. She leaves to check on her blonde compatriot and Issei frowns. "Hey, what's happening?" Issei groaned as he stood to his feet. He looked to see the blonde boy, bruised and beaten, but nothing too wrong. However, the same could not be said about Bell. The boy was, to put it simply, messed up. He had a deep wound in his stomach and lay flat on the floor, struggling even to stand. Besides him was Asia, who was trying her best to heal the injuries. Not wasting a step, Issei rushed over to check up on him. "Bell." Issei yells. The injuries weren't deep enough for an instantaneous death. Still, with a multitude of organs shredded and his spine barely holding itself together, death would be soon if nothing was done. "Asia, is he?" The blonde girl is helping with her healing. But, for whatever reason, Twilight healing wasn't healing as wholly as it usually does tonight. Skin and muscle were repaired, but organs were barely being recovered quickly enough, and his spine didn't even seem to heal. Issei, it's not looking good. I'm trying my best, but all it's doing is keeping him stable. The boosted gear user decides he has to intervene. He doesn't have much stamina left, but he would use what he could to help save him. As he prepared to give her a boost in power, there was a sudden chill in the air. Both devils felt a slight tingle in their backs, someone was behind them. Spinning their heads around, they saw a cloaked figure walking towards them. It was slow and methodical and was meant to draw attention to itself. Issei quickly rises and readies himself for another fight. Still, the figure is already behind him. The figure is already behind him. It wasn't looking at him, only resting a hand on his shoulder. It's breathing heavy, almost like light panting. That tingling feeling was amplified to a ridiculous level. Issei was nearly paralyzed in terror, but stood firm enough not to collapse, but not enough to even move. After such, the figure whispers, "Please move," before letting go and walking up to Asia and Bell. Asia looks up to the cloaked person, clearly not wanting to let anything wrong happen to the injured boy, but the figure simply repeats its order. "Please move." Asia still didn't move aside, but a hand lightly tugged at her shirt. She looked down to see Bell just choked out, "It's Dodo Kalet." Daughter. It took a moment, but the former nun backed off, and the figure crouched beside Bell. They reach into their coat and grab a blood bag. It tears the top open and pours the crimson liquid down the boy's mouth. Wait, Asia was concerned with whatever the person was doing, but they held out their hands, indicating her to wait. After a few gulps, Bell miraculously rises back up, with the hole in his chest slowly healing. Haha, thanks, sis. Bell smiles before the figure reveals their identity. Mars, exhausted from all the running she had to do. You're welcome, eh? I need to sit down, she panted before collapsing. The two bystanders looked shocked at what scared them, which was just a girl. Issei moves over to Bell, glad he was alive but still worried that well, he had a big hole in his stomach. How are you alive? And what's with the blood bag? He spat at the two questions in quick succession. Oh, I never told you. My bad. Bell chuckles at the realization of how a crucial fact could be ignored. Well, to put it simply. Well, who do we have here? Everyone spun around to see four people. Kiba, Kaneko, Akeno, and Riaz. Bell with a hole in his chest, are you okay? Riaz briefly loses her professionalism. With a shrug, Bell simply gives a thumbs up and turns her attention to Mors and an unwanted hunter. Mors tries to give a light smile as she replies, hi Riaz. How's your day been? It was good until now. Lem guess, fried frog probably isn't a smell you want to walk into, eh? I know the feeling, Mors goes on with an awkward laugh for a bit, but when everyone looks at her like she's a crazy person, she just clears her throat in embarrassment. So, what seems to be the problem here? Well, let's see. A demon showed up on Kuo Academy grounds. It managed to create some pocket dimension, almost killed two members of my peerage, and then you showed up. The good news is that I took care of one of those problems. What to do about the second? Ria starts thinking of ways to resolve this issue before Akeno chimes in. How about we punish her and send off with that reminder? Akeno says in her cheerful tone. That's great and all, but like Mors says, I gotta take my brother home. Dad's probably worried sick about us and he's making meatloaf tonight. Come on, let's go. She rushes to touch her brother's shoulder, only to feel a stinging sensation in her hands. She yelps in surprise and looks at her hand before immediately having a big dumb grin. Riaz looks surprised at this and starts to wonder what she's planning. Hey, we aren't done here. Mors looks back around and slightly grimaces. She spins around and looks with a smile. Hey, this is my brother. He's, hopefully, not in your peerage and I haven't done anything but come and pick up what is mine. It's nothing to fight over, right? She gestures with her hands and Riaz looks slightly exasperated before turning around. Issei, Asia. Let's go. We're done here. The two start to walk away, looking back to see Bell waving at them. They smile back before moving to their king's side as her peerage walks. Take that rock with you as well. Mors simply smirked and moved to the stone. She placed her hand on it and saw it shrink until it was the size of a normal one. She picks it up before turning back to Bell, returning with a dumb smirk on her face. Bell looks surprised when she comes to pick him up, securing him on her back. She asks him if he's okay, and he nods. And within moments, she's gone in a flash. Back at the Orc clubhouse. Riaz sits on a chair while Akeno stands beside her. She's clearly thinking about something, and Akeno notices as she bends over and asks, President, why did you let her go? Mors is the biggest concern within the area. Riaz looks back, pondering for a minute why she did that. Since that day, Mors has been on the back of the Orc president's mind. There wasn't an issue here, so we didn't need to press ourselves into a fight. Besides, something is clearly going on with Bell. We'd better keep a close look at him from now. Back home. Mors kicks down the door to the home, shocking her father as to the sudden intrusion. What the honey, what are you doing? Azrael shrieks as his eyes widened over the meal he was preparing. The horseman of death marches forwards, eyes gleaming with joy as she carried her younger brother like a suitcase. She walks up to the tall man and starts rambling in Spanish. That connection and so I thin. Azrael stops her with a single finger against her lips. Sweetie, it's hard to understand you when you're talking that fast in Spanish. She immediately realized her mistake before compassing herself with a couple short breaths. She also drops Bell to the ground with a sudden crash. Bell might have finally awakened his powers. Azrael is slightly confused, but within seconds, he's got a similar dumb grin on his face. He laughs and chuckles with Mors, the two of them looking down at Bell, who's still lying on the floor. What's going on, guys? Bell looks up to see his sister and father all giddy. Azrael reaches down and lifts Bell up high. You've awakened your powers. Finally. He laughs before closing in for a hug. Bell is receptive, hugging him back by instinct before looking back with a big dumb smile. So like, I've got superpowers? Bell asks. By definition, yes. Azrael chuckles. Mors, meanwhile, grabs a cup of water and sets it on the table. She calls her family over and within moments, Bell's family surrounds him in anticipation. Let's see your spark, hermano. She leans in closer, trying to catch every single detail of what her brother can do. Azrael is silent and distant, but still watching. Belle looks around, nervously chuckles at how sudden this was. But not wanting to disappoint, he reaches out and puts his hands around the cup. He tries to focus all the power he can into the cup, eyes clenched and teeth gritting. He grimaces with all his might, and his two family members lean in even closer. Eventually, there's a sudden and bright burst of red energy that expands out, knocking down several vases and swinging cabinets opening. And all that results in a couple cracks in the glass. Belle looks a bit disappointed by the result, but Mors and Azrael could not be happier. Mors grabs him by the waist and lifts him up into the air, ecstatic that something had manifested. She's all giddy. But what are my powers? Belle asks, focused more on what he can do, rather than doing it. Azrael looks at the cup, perplexed. Well, your power was kind of just a roll on what it could do, and I'm not sure which one this is or what it can do. I might need to consult heaven, but even this might be too much of an anomaly to account for. Mors chimes in. Oh, how about? No. Not him. He holds a grim expression at the mention of that man. Mors comically shrinks at her dad's reluctance and decides that she'll have to figure it out tomorrow herself. Well, I'll do it myself. Now then, Belle, get your homework done and get ready for dinner. She sends Belle off with a smile to his room. Once he's down the hall, she turns to her dad. Well, it's a start. But at the rate he's going at, it might take a while for something decent to fully manifest. Still, you'll just have to be patient. It's better for him to have powers than not. Yeah. I know. Well, I guess I gotta catch some Z's. But before she could head off, Azrael hands her a broom. But before that, you're gonna help me clean the house. There's a lot of broken glass. He smiles sarcastically and Mors grimaces before grabbing the broom and starting to sweep all the shattered chunks off the floor as Azrael walks back to the stove to finish his dinner. Tonight, they were going to have lasagna. The cloaked figure stepped into the dimly lit warehouse, the air thick with an eerie anticipation. He drew a precise circle on the dusty floor, and from the arcane markings, the projection of a monstrous entity, an amalgamation of grotesque fish forms that horrifically surged and undulated. Speak, servant of the abyss. Why do you disturb my dominion? The chorus of distorted whispers echo throughout the warehouse. The hooded man bowed respectfully. My lord, my previous summon, the frog demon, has been obliterated. I require more formidable forces. The aquatic entity's form flickered with displeasure. You ask for more, yet you squander what you receive. My resources under the abyss's seal are not limitless. This did not undeter the man. I understand, but circumstances demand additional strength. I propose a pact. Monstrous eyes fixated on the cloaked figure. Skepticism was clear from the tone of its voice. Explain, mortal. The man laid out a scroll, detailing the summoning of a leech-like entity that fed on blood to grow in power. The leech demon. This creature will aid your cause, and in return, we shall feed it the essence it craves. The entity's form shifted. There was contemplative silence lingering in the warehouse. Blood is the currency of power. I accept your pact, but heed my warning, was not the life force it requires. With a nod of agreement, the hooded figure watched as the entity spawned the leech-like entity into existence. And popped into this plane in the figure's hand, no bigger than an apple. The man could sense that the creature was quite weak, even at this state, but it held much potential. I shall forgive your past failure, only if and when you can acquire enough human blood. Do not disappoint. And with a blink, the school of monstrous fish fades into a puddle. The man sighs at his master's mercy, before looking down to the worm wriggling in his hands. Don't worry, little one. We shall get you all the blood you need. But at this size, we'll need to find less animate beings. The next day. Belle's eyes lingered on the clock on the classroom wall. It was 3:10 p.m. 5 minutes until he could leave for home. No point in hiding how giddy he was at this thought. He glanced back down to see the homeroom teacher reminding his students to turn in their work on the date, giving a particularly nasty look to the perverts huddled in the corner. The man finished his lecture and slinked back into his desk to grade all the papers given to him by exhausted high schoolers. This was an indication to his students that they may leave. Many students huddled out of the classroom in a single file line that split off the moment they were out in the school's corridor. Belle was among them as he bounded down the hall and out of his class. With a few hops and a skip, he touched down on the courtyard with a kick up of dust. Belle took in a big huff of air before exhaling. After taking in a few more breaths, he let out a hearty laugh. A laugh so spontaneous, plenty of students changed their paths to avoid the smiling classmate. Moments later, he laid a bench. A Nintendo DS in hand, playing one of the many Pokémon spin-offs. It wasn't particularly fun, as without a guide or access to the internet he was flying in blind and making mistake after mistake. But it was all he had to himself until his sister came to pick him up. Game over. Those words popped up on the screen for the millionth time this hour. Bell pulled his head back from the screen in disappointment. He quickly closes the console and slides it back into his backpack. When he brings his head back up, he's greeted by a familiar face and voice. "Hey. How's the wound holding up?" Bell sits upright to allow for Issei to sit next to him. "Oh. You don't have to worry about it. I'm here, aren't I?" "Yeah, but you had a basketball-sized hole in your stomach. And you just healed it like it was nothing." Bell shakes his head in disagreement. "Not nothing. I can't heal by myself, Atlas, not yet. I think." The brown-haired boy is just more confused. "Not yet. I think. What was going on?" "Look, Bell. You owe me an explanation. What's going on?" That last part brought him back to the first time he was in this situation. Trying to come up with an excuse as to why this fellow classmate could hurt monsters with just a shovel and sheer strength. He already used the "I know magic" excuse, so trying to use it again to explain his regeneration would certainly be called out. Not to mention, there were no magic seals during the process. All that was left was the truth. "Alright. So, I'm part demon." "Oh, so you're a devil." No. Demon, not devil. They're kind-like blobs of negative energy that pop out here and there. Like that frog we fought last night. Demons have this ability to heal their wounds by well, I don't know. I wasn't told much else." Issei looked on with a mix of confusion and understanding. He understood about half of what he was saying, but the gaps that were missing in his head had still went unfilled. But there wasn't much use prodding since Bell had already given all he knew. "Glad to see you're okay. I was getting a bit worried something bad might have happened overnight. Anyways, what games did you have on your DS?" Before the two boys could get to playing, they heard a voice call out for her brother. Bell couldn't quite get anything she said past his name. Issei could. Quite clearly too. He gave a friendly wave to the approaching woman. She throws back a wave before directing her attention back onto her brother. Not entertained by the lack of response for the past minute, Moores gestures to the gate right behind her. It was time to go. "Right. We have a trip in 2 days to Tokyo." This was new information to the devil, but it was something he could get behind. Might be a family thing or a business trip for his dad. Best not to pry. Especially with her around. The quick glance over her shoulder causes Moores to reach into her bag and bring out an object wrapped in tinfoil. She lazily tossed the item over to Issei, who caught as a spontaneous reaction. "Here. An empum. Think of it as a kind of Mexican sandwich. I kept it a little too long in the oven, but it adds to the crunchiness." It was a kind of peace offering, at least between Issei. She never paid much attention to him if she ever saw him, but from all the praise Bell kept piling onto him, this was a kid with a good heart. He had to if he could be around him. With a goodbye wave, the two departed back for their home. They had some packing and training to start. "What do you have in your hands?" The king looks at her entering pawn from her desk. He still had the wrapped empum, even all the way back to the orc meeting room. Other than preoccupied Akeno, the two stood in a brief silence. Eventually, it breaks. "This is an empum, President. It's 2 tortillas covered in lard with beans and salsa between it. A kind of Mexican sandwich." Riaz didn't even look at the meal, just focusing on the heaps of paperwork she was shuffling through. There was an empty cup of coffee on the table. The insides were stained with a black ring after multiple pours. In the zone was the best way to describe the crimson-haired devil as she were right now. It was going to take something significant to knock her out of this trance. "Did they open a diner nearby that sells this?" "Just asking in case I want to try it." "No. It was a gift, President. From Moores." Dead quiet. Riaz takes her eyes off her papers and looks dead at Issei. Akeno, who was just deep in a good book, is also parroting her king's sentiment. The pawn is clearly uncomfortable with the energy these two are generating right now. The two exchange glances before Riaz looks inquisitively at Issei. "Do you want me to check for any toxins in the sandwich?" "President." "She's right. You don't know what kind of tricks she maybe have snuck in there." Akeno sarcastically chimes in. "Eyes. Why would she bother making food to poison me when she could easily kill me with her magic? Why do snakes you poison? Makes the kill easier." What Akeno just said made absolutely no sense. From a biological perspective at least. He didn't bother to correct her, though. The sentiment was all the same. "I just don't want you to get in the crossfire between me and her. It's already rough to manage our clients when other people just keep leasing out services to monster hunters. Having to actually go and fight her to save your life would be something else." Immediately, she realizes there might be some negative implications with what she's saying. Embarrassment runs on her face as she goes to apologize. "Not that your life wouldn't be worth saving." Akeno chuckles at her president's accidental wording. A comforting hand on the shoulder allows her to calm down from her embarrassment. "I think he understands what you meant, President." "Right. Anyways, if anyone is going to put their life at risk in this conflict, it shall be me. Hand me the empum. A chunk of the sandwich is thrown into her hand and within seconds, she taking a bite. Akeno is immediately prepared to remove the sandwich from her president the moment anything seems off. Issei just looks a bit perplexed with how serious she's treating this. Chew. 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 Riaz moves over to a trash bin and spits out the chunk. Her queen and pawn move over to the side to see what went wrong. President. What happened? Was it poisoned? Visible concern stains Akeno's face. No, it's just overcooked. Too crunchy as well. Relief washes over them, both of them. Riaz returns to a more serious demeanor, asking Issei what he knows about Belle. He gives her what he was told. Demons, well, thank you. You are dismissed. Once that door closes shut, Riaz stands up and turns to her friend. Best to keep a close eye on him if he's as troublesome as his sister, things are going to get messy. Riaz commands. Understood. Shall I look into these demons he speaks of? Akeno replies. Yes. I want to know what they really are and what they can do. Don't know if what Issei was told was the full side of the story. But the nod and a few steps, Akeno out of the room as well. The president of Orc decides she best finishes her work before making any real big decisions. She takes a glance at the discarded sandwich, clearly disgusted. She remembers at how crisp yet tasteless it was. Way too overcooked. No, it wasn't too bad. No one's gonna choke on a sandwich. The elder sister reprimanded her brother's critique on cooking. She found it especially ironic coming from someone who couldn't even make a PB without emergency services on speed dial. Devil do have extreme tastes. Something so workshop might cause some sensors to ring through their head. Workshopped. She would take the insult even further if it wasn't for them being already up the stairs and in front of the door. Best save it for inside. The two siblings stumble back into the familiar cramped apartment. The sound of bags falling to the floor reaches the ear of a familiar face. Azrael is unmoving on the couch. A phone is gripped in his hand with a stone-cold hold. Immediately, the two rush over to their dad. Worry strikes their face as the man struggles to form words. Dad, what happened? Why do you look like that? Bella asks. Did you miss a sale or something? Moores tries to bring a sense of levity, but all manner of joking around was dropped the minute that her father looked up with strained eyes. Kids, Mr. White just called, there's been an incident in Shibuya. End of the part 1. So how was this story? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this story with your friends and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.